Hey board gamers, how's it going? It's Mike Cassie here with the Weirdwood Manor board game vlog episode number 2. Thanks for joining me. So in this episode, we finally are ready to start getting to work on our project. Where do we start? Well, in my experience as a product designer over the years, one of the most important things when you start a new project is to have some kind of roadmap to follow to guide you along the way. And in this case, working with a new team, Paul, his team at Wasabi, I felt it was doubly important to have a really clear guide for them and the project. Something that set out all the goals and all the steps or phases that we had to follow as part of getting a board game finished and hopefully into your hands. In order to do so, I laid out a Gantt chart. A nice clear visual representation of all the phases, the duration of each, and the order in which that we were going to have to do them. And that plan came out at about 33 months, a fairly long process, and that might change, we'll see, but it gave us a good starting point to know all the things that we were going to have to tackle. So what are those particular phases? Ideation, initial game design, testing and development, content creation, Kickstarter planning, the actual Kickstarter campaign, production, manufacturing, shipping, fulfillment, and finally, marketing. So let's take a look at those phases in a bit more detail. So the first phase was ideation. Ideation started on the day we started the kickoff meetings, and I had planned it for 1 month. And it involved basically some time to gather information from the team for me to go back and come up with game ideas, game design directions that I could then pitch to the team in a month's time. The second phase was the initial game design. And this was a time that after we had sort of chosen a direction that we felt we wanted to go in, I would spend time now starting to design the actual game. This would involve basically creating prototypes, play testing them, iterating them, slowly building a rule set until at the end of that phase we had basically a rule set and a prototype that we felt represented the game fairly well. So then phase number 3 was basically what was referred to as testing and development. In most board game cycles you have a development phase where you have a board game designed, but now you have to go through the process of play testing it a lot, really refining the mechanics, and making certain that what you end up with is a final polished board game that's super fun to play. And that process can take a lot of time. It requires a lot of play tests, and often you might have to go back and change design decisions from your core design based on the play testing. You might have to rip things out or revisit whole mechanics and take some steps backwards in order to take some steps forward. So that particular phase I'd set out as being anywhere from I think 12 to 14 months. It can be a long process. In conjunction with that phase number 3 was what I referred to as phase number 4, and that was content creation. And content creation can be a lot of things, but generally in our case it was going to break down into creating stuff we needed for the game. So that could be writing stories, narrative, flavor text. It would be graphic design for the final game. It would be character design, possibly doing design for 3D minis for the sculpts, and possibly as well, in our case, it might be the inclusion of an app component for the board game. So that phase would run concurrent with phase 3. At the end of those 2 phases, we would come to phase number 5, which was planning for the Kickstarter, which I'd set out at 3 months. And that involved doing things like figuring out our strategy, figuring out what our pricing would be, prepping assets and everything for the actual Kickstarter page, doing some testing perhaps of different Kickstarter pages, all leading towards the eventual launch of our Kickstarter. And that's phase number 6, our Kickstarter. I had pinned that down at a month, a 30-day Kickstarter. It might be less, not likely more. After the Kickstarter, we roll into phase number 7, which I refer to as a production phase. And this phase involved basically getting all the assets together and get everything ready so that we can start to have the game manufactured over in China. Running after the Kickstarter, there's a good chance that due to stretch goals and other things that we might have additional things to prep and design, and some things might change based on our initial or original core design for the game. So that 3-month window gives us the opportunity to go through that, prep everything, start to send files to China, get samples back from China to look at those, make certain that everything is looking okay from our perspective before we're ready to sign off and say, okay, great, manufacture the game for us. Which leads us to phase number 8, the actual manufacturing of the game. And so that process, which happens over China, can vary, again, based on samples and quality control. We might have to go back and have things redone or tweak things. At the end of that 3-month phase for manufacturing, we come to phase number 9, and that's shipping. And that is basically the process where the games are ready to be packaged up, put on ships, and shipped to fulfillment centers in different parts of the world. And that brings us to phase number 10, which is fulfillment. So after all the games or the game pieces arrive at the fulfillment centers in the various locations, they have to be essentially assembled, packaged, and shipped to you, the players. And then the last phase of the project, which runs concurrent across the entire project, phase number 11, is marketing. And marketing, in our case, was going to involve a lot of different things. For starters, you watching this video right now, this is part of the marketing to some degree. It's a chance to talk to an audience and hopefully build some buzz around the game. But there were a lot of other options and channels for us to talk to. Some of them included existing Weirdwood channels, people who already knew the Weirdwood universe, they love the game or they love the books. So we were certainly going to be talking to those people, but then there are other things that we needed to do over the course of the project leading up to the Kickstarter in terms of talking to other people in the board gaming community, trying to get the game out there for previews, and basically trying to build some buzz around that. One important thing to note for you is that this project plan that I drew together probably looks quite pretty. It's nicely laid out and attractive. Well, I've got a lot of experience designing, so it was easy for me to make something that was really nice to look at and easy to read. But the important thing to note here is when you do a project plan, it doesn't have to be pretty. You don't have to do a Gantt chart. It could be as simple as writing a bunch of estimated dates and activities in a Word document or a text document. The core here, the takeaway, the important thing is to take some time to think about the various things that you have to do to get from point A to point Z. Try and list those out, try and estimate some time, and try and figure out what it's going to take for you or other people involved in the project to get you across that finish line. It doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to be exact, and it's going to change as the project proceeds, but you'd be surprised how that little bit of effort up front can really help you down the road, and it'll make the whole project run smoother and ultimately help you ship a better board game. Okay, so I've got a plan, so now what do I do with it? Well, in the next episode, Paul, myself, and the team are going to take a few days away from the regular world and sequester ourselves away in some highly guarded, secret, undisclosed location where we're going to start work on the first phase of the project, which is ideation. I'm going to lead the team through some exercises, and we're going to try and figure out some of the big ideas and directions that we're going to need to hit or consider as we get into the actual design of the board game. So until then, as always, subscribe and like if you like what we're doing, and leave me any comments or questions down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter. And until then, keep gaming, board gamers.